Hi, my little ones. It is time for another bedtime story from our Sleepy Times Tales book. We've got a few stories left out of this book, and then I'll be passing it on for someone else to enjoy. Tonight's story is a folk tale of France of the Puss in Boots. And here is the first picture. You can see the kitty cat down there at the bottom. As soon as I get done reading the pages, I will show you the picture. But this is what the first page looks like. All right. Let's get started. Got my glasses. There was an old miller who passed away, leaving 3 sons, only his mill, his donkey, and his cat. The division was soon made. The eldest got the mill, the second the donkey, and the youngest nothing but the cat. The poor young fellow was very unhappy. "My brothers," he sighed, "can make a decent living by joining their property together, but my cat isn't good for anything." The cat overheard this remark, but pretended he didn't. "Don't you worry, young master. All you need to do is give me a bag and a pair of boots, so I can scamper through the dirt and brambles, and you'll see how handy I am." "Humph," said his master. On the other hand, he had often seen this cat use cunning tricks to catch rats and mice, like when he used to hang up by his heels, or hide in the mill bag, or pretend to be dead. Maybe old Puss wasn't totally useless. So he went out and got Puss a bag and a pair of boots, and fit the cat just right. When Puss received what he asked for, he slipped on the new boots, and putting his bag on his back, he set out to seek his fortune. Soon he came to a warren of rabbits. He filled the bag with bran, stretched out as if he were dead, and waited for the unsuspecting rabbits to come up and nibble at his bag. Well, Puss had hardly lain down when a silly young funny bunny jumped right into the bag. The cat pulled the strings tight, and, proud of his cleverness, set out for the palace, where he asked to speak to the king. He was shown upstairs into the king's chambers, where he had a low bow and said, "I am proud to have the honor, sir, of bringing you this rabbit, which my noble lord, the master of Carnabas," this is what Puss decided to call his young master, "has commanded me to present to your majesty from him." "Tell your master," replied the king, "that I thank him, and that this gives me a great deal of pleasure." Another time Puss hid himself among some tall corn stalks, holding his bag open. When a couple of partridges ran into it, he drew the strings. Then he also presented to the king. The king once again received the gift with great pleasure, and ordered some money to be given to the puss. The cat continued for the next 2 or 3 months to carry game from his master to the king. Puss knew that on a particular day the king was going to the riverside with his daughter, the most beautiful princess in the world, so he said to his master, "If you'll follow my advice, your fortune will be made. Just go to the river today and wash yourself. I'll show you where to go, and leave the rest to me." Crazy cat, thought his young master, but what did he have to lose? So, without knowing why or wherefore, the master of Carabas did as Puss suggested. While he was washing, the king passed by in his carriage, and the cat began to cry out, "Help, help! My lord Marquis of Carnabas is drowning." At this noise the king put his head out the window, and recognizing the cat that had so often brought him gifts, commanded his guard to save the poor drowning lord. While they were pulling the cat's surprised young master from the river, Puss came up to the coach and told the king that while his master was in the water, some villains had made off with his clothes, though he had cried out, "Thieves! Thieves!" many times, as loud as he could. Actually, the cat had hidden the clothes under a rock. At this, the king immediately ordered his officers to run and fetch some clothing for the Lord Marquis of Carnabas. The cat's young master was a handsome youth, and the clothes looked so fine on him. The king's daughter took a bit of a liking to him, and no sooner had Lord Carnabas cast 2 or 3 respectful and somewhat tender glances her way than she fell madly in love. The king invited him to accompany them on their ride, and he gladly accepted. Meanwhile, Puss, overjoyed to see his plan working so well, had run ahead where he came upon some countrymen mowing a meadow. "Good people," he said, "if you do not tell the king the meadow you are mowing belongs to Lord Carnabas, you will be thrown into the dungeon." Sure enough, the king asked who owned the meadow, and the people replied, their knees knocking with fear, "Lord Carnabas, your majesty." Puss ran on further ahead and met some reapers. "Good people," he said, "if you do not tell the king the corn you are reaping belongs to Lord Carnabas, you will be thrown into the dungeon." When the king passed, he asked to whom the corn belonged. "To Lord Carnabas, your majesty," replied the reapers. The cat said the same words to all he met, and the king was amazed at the vast estates of the Lord Marquis of Carnabas. Puss came at last to a beautiful and stately castle. The castle was owned by an ogre, the richest in the world. And let me show you these pictures before we continue on. That's just the rabbit getting in the bag and stuff. But look how beautiful the princess is. She's so beautiful. And there's the guy, the cat's master. Alright. The castle was owned by an ogre, the richest in the world, for all the lands the king had passed actually belonged to the castle. Puss knew all this, presented himself at the ogre's door, saying he just couldn't pass without the honor of paying his respects. The ogre received him as politely as an ogre could, and made him sit down. "I've been told," said Puss, "that you have the gift of being able to change yourself into all kinds of creatures, a lion, an elephant, a bear." "That's true," bragged the ogre. "If you don't believe me, I'll prove it to you." With that, he changed into a huge roaring lion. "Eek!" screamed Puss, and jumped out the window and up to the roof. And that wasn't easy, because his boots were of no use at all for scrambling across roof tiles. Shortly after, Puss saw the ogre had returned to his normal form, so he came back down. "Well," said Puss, "changing yourself into an animal bigger than yourself is fairly impressive, but I bet you can't change yourself into something smaller. That's impossible." "Impossible!" cried the ogre. "I'll show you." With that, he changed himself into a little mouse and began to scurry around the floor. When Puss saw this, he leaped upon him and ate him up. Meanwhile, the king had reached the castle and desired to go up to it to see who owned it. Puss heard the carriage approaching and ran out to the drawbridge to meet them. "Your Majesty is welcome to this castle of my Lord Marquis of Carnabas." "What? My Lord Marquis?" cried the king. "And does this castle also belong to you? This is one of the finest courtyards I've ever seen." The Marquis gave his hand to the princess and followed the king into the great hall. There they found a magnificent feast which the ogre had prepared for his friends who were going to visit that day, but dared not enter, knowing the king was there. The king was perfectly charmed with his daughter, who was now even more in love. "It will be your own fault, Lord Marquis, if you don't become my son-in-law," said the king. The Marquis, making many low bows, accepted the honor and was married to the princess the very same day. Puss became a great lord and never ran after mice any more, except for his own amusement. So the poor boy got a castle, and the prince, he got turned into a prince and got to marry the princess. So the cat made him live happily ever after. So he got the best gift of all. So that was our story tonight, guys. The Puss in the Boots. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope you all have sweet dreams. Good night, my little ones. God bless you all.